Welcome in. I'm Hunter Kanoki, and this is Fool's FAQ, a show where I take the internet's most burning questions and give you an answer that'll make you the smartest person at your next lake trip. On today's episode, Scotland's most famous celebrity. We've all seen it. A long serpentine neck rising from the dark waters, a humped back breaking the surface, a creature from the age of dinosaurs somehow surviving in the murky depths of a Scottish lake for millions of years. The Loch Ness Monster, affectionately known as Nessie, has captured imaginations for nearly a century, spawning thousands of alleged sightings, countless expeditions, and a tourism industry worth tens of millions of dollars. But here's a question that won't go away. Is any of it even real? Some believers point to over 1,100 documented sightings since 1933. They cite sonar contacts that can't be explained, photographs that remain mysterious, and eyewitness accounts from seemingly credible people. They argue that Loch Ness is vast, containing more water than all the lakes in England and Wales combined, and its murky, peat-stained waters offer perfect cover for something massive to hide. Skeptics, on the other hand, have debunked nearly every famous piece of evidence, expose elaborate hoaxes, and point out that modern science has found exactly zero proof of any monster. So, who's right? Well, let's dive into the dark waters of Loch Ness and see what we can find. The modern legend of Nessie exploded into public consciousness in 1933, but stories of strange creatures in the loch stretch back much further. The earliest recorded account comes from the year 565 AD, when Irish monk Saint Columba allegedly encountered a beast in the river Ness, which flows from Loch Ness. Now, according to the account written by a 7th century biographer, Columba came upon a group of Picts burying a man who had been attacked and killed by a water beast. Now, to test the creature, Columba ordered one of his followers, a monk named Lugne Mokumen, to swim across the river. The beast surfaced with a mighty roar and charged towards the helpless monk with its mouth wide open. Just as it was about to strike, no more than a spear's length away, Columba made the sign of a cross and commanded, quote, "You will go no further. Do not touch the man. Leave at once," unquote. The creature reportedly fled in terror, moving, quote, "more quickly than if it had been pulled back with ropes," unquote. Now, whether this was an actual monster, a large seal or oversized fish, or simply a medieval morality tale is anyone's guess. What we do know is that for centuries afterward, sightings were sporadic and mostly confined to local Scottish folklore. Then came 1933, the year everything changed. In April, a hotel manager named Aldi Mackay claimed she saw an enormous whale-like creature while driving along the A82 road with her husband. The Inverness Courier published an article about her sighting on May 2nd, and the editor, a man named Evan Barron, reportedly suggested calling the creature a monster. And the name stuck. Just 3 months later, on July 22nd, George Spicer and his wife reported seeing a large creature with a long, wavy neck cross the road in front of the car before disappearing into the loch. The Inverness Courier published this account on August 4th, triggering an absolute avalanche of letters from readers describing their own sightings. The Loch Ness Monster had officially been born, and the media frenzy was just getting started. The first photograph allegedly showing the monster was taken on November 12th, 1933, by a man named Hugh Gray. The image was blurred and indistinct, but it made headlines. When examined closely, some researchers believed it showed Gray's Labrador retrieving a stick in the water. Others suggested it was an otter or a swan. But regardless, the damage was done. Nessie mania was in full swing. Now, in December 1933, the Daily Mail commissioned a big game hunter named Marmaduke Wetherell to track down the creature. And side note, if I were to ever commission a big game hunter, I would hope that his name is Marmaduke Wetherell. Now, along the lakeshore, Wetherell found what he claimed were large footprints that belonged to a very powerful soft-footed animal about 20 feet long. But then, zoologists at the Natural History Museum quickly determined that the tracks were identical and had been made with an umbrella stand or ashtray that had a hippopotamus leg as a base. Now, whether Wetherell was in on the hoax or had been fooled himself remains unclear, but the Daily Mail was not amused. Then came the most famous Loch Ness photograph of all time, the 1934 surgeon's photograph. Taken by London gynecologist Robert Kenneth Wilson, The image showed what appeared to be a slender neck and small head rising from the water. The Daily Mail bought exclusive rights, and for nearly 60 years, this photograph was considered the definitive proof of Nessie's existence. But there was just one problem. It was a complete and utter hoax. The truth finally emerged in 1994. Marmaduke Wetherell, still bitter about being humiliated over the fake footprints, had orchestrated an elaborate revenge scheme. His stepson, Christian Sperling, built a model using a toy submarine purchased from Woolworths, then shaped a head and neck from wood putty and attached it to the top. They photographed it in the loch, and Wilson agreed to present the photo as his own to give it credibility. For 6 decades, the world's most iconic monster photograph was literally a toy submarine with a fake head glued on top. However, not all evidence turned out to be hoaxes. Some remains genuinely unexplained, or at least harder to dismiss. In April 1960, aeronautical engineer Tim Dinsdale filmed what he described as a mahogany red hum moving across the water near Foyers. The 65-second film became a sensation. Then, in 1966, the Joint Air Reconnaissance Intelligence Center analyzed the footage and concluded that the object was, quote, probably animate, unquote. For decades, believers pointed to the Dinsdale film as the best evidence for Nessie's existence. But modern analysis tells a different story. Researchers now believe that Dinsdale filmed a fishing boat under poor lighting conditions. His comparison footage, shot an hour later using a white boat under different lighting, didn't match because the conditions had changed. Enhanced analysis revealed what appears to be a pale blob in multiple frames, consistent with the position of a boat's helmsman. The object never actually submerged, as many thought. It simply blended into the water's gray reflections. Now, Dinsdale himself wasn't a hoaxer. He genuinely believed he'd seen something extraordinary. But confirmation bias, the tendency to interpret evidence in ways that confirm what you already believe, likely led him astray. But beyond photographs and films, sonar has produced some of the most intriguing and persistent evidence. In October 1987, an expedition called Operation Deep Scan swept Loch Ness with a fleet of 24 boats equipped with sonar units. The boats formed a slow-moving line, creating a sort of sonar curtain as they traveled the length of the loch. On the first day alone, they recorded 3 strong contacts at depths ranging from 78 meters to 180 meters. The best contact, detected near Urquhart Bay, tracked an object for 140 seconds. Sonar expert Darrell Lawrence estimated the contacts represented something, quote, larger than a shark, but smaller than a whale, unquote. 5 boats returned the next morning to check the sites of the previous day's contacts, and they found nothing. That proved that the contacts were not fixed objects, like submerged logs or rocks, but moving targets in mid-water. So what were they? Nobody knows. Despite covering an estimated 60% of the loch's total area, Operation Deep Scan couldn't definitively explain those 3 large sonar contacts. Adrian Shine, a naturalist who spent decades investigating Loch Ness, led many of these scientific efforts. Now, his work focused less on proving or disproving monsters and more on understanding the loch's ecology and environment. Through the 1990s, studies from 20 universities examined everything from water chemistry to fish populations, which brings us to the most comprehensive scientific investigation ever conducted at Loch Ness, the 2018 Environmental DNA Survey. Professor Neil Gemmell of the University of Otago in New Zealand led a team that collected over 250 water samples from different depths and locations throughout the loch. The idea behind environmental DNA, or eDNA, is simple. Every living creature sheds genetic material into its surroundings through skin cells, waste, and other biological traces. By extracting and sequencing DNA from water samples, scientists can identify what species are present without ever seeing the animals themselves. The results were definitive. The survey identified around 3,000 different species living in or around Loch Ness, including all 13 known fish species, plus frogs, toads, ducks, deer, pigs, cattle, dogs, and humans. And DNA from European eels was found at virtually every location sampled, but there was absolutely no evidence of any reptilian DNA whatsoever. No plesiosaurs, no prehistoric marine reptiles, nothing even remotely close. Gemmell addressed the giant eel theory, which had been floated as a possible explanation for sightings, by acknowledging that while eel DNA was abundant, there was no way to determine the size of individual eels from DNA alone. Quote, "Our data doesn't reveal their size, but the sheer quantity of the material says that we can't discount the possibility that there may be giant eels in Loch Ness," he said. "Therefore, we can't discount the possibility that what people see and believe is the Loch Ness Monster might be a giant eel," unquote. But here's the thing. The survey couldn't eliminate giant eels any more than it could eliminate giant salmon, giant dogs, or giant toads. The conclusion was essentially a consolation prize for the tourism industry. Now, further, let's talk about why a plesiosaur, the most popular theory for Nessie's identity, is scientifically impossible. First, plesiosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago along with the dinosaurs, which I did a previous episode about. Loch Ness itself is only about 10,000 years old, formed at the end of the last ice age when glaciers carved out the Great Glen. Before that, the area was frozen solid for roughly 20,000 years. So where exactly would a plesiosaur population have lived before the loch even existed? Second, plesiosaurs were air-breathing reptiles. They would have needed to surface frequently, perhaps 20 or so times a day, to breathe. With that many trips to the surface, sightings would be constant and undeniable, not sporadic and blurry. Third, to maintain a genetically viable breeding population over millions of years, you need at least 30 to 40 individuals minimum, and more realistically, you'd probably need hundreds. The only lake on Earth that currently supports a marine mammal population is Lake Baikal in Russia, which is home to the Baikal Sea, and Lake Baikal is over 500 times larger than Loch Ness. A lake the size of Loch Ness, just 22 square miles, simply couldn't sustain a viable plesiosaur population. And fourth, as the DNA survey definitively showed, there was zero reptilian DNA found in the loch. Now, some believers got excited in 2022 when paleontologists discovered fossils of plesiosaurs in a 100-million-year-old freshwater river system in Morocco's Sahara Desert. The discovery proved that some plesiosaur species could tolerate freshwater, not just saltwater. Headlines screamed that Nessie's existence was now plausible. But Dr. Nick Longrich, the study's lead author, quickly pumped the brakes on that interpretation. He said, quote, "Is the existence of a plesiosaur in Loch Ness likely? Unfortunately, no," he told reporters. "The existence of freshwater plesiosaurs removes one major obstacle. Could a marine lineage survive in a freshwater loch? Yes, but you still have all of these other obstacles to overcome," unquote. The loch is too small, too young, and too thoroughly studied to hide a breeding population of prehistoric reptiles. So if there's no monster, what are people actually seeing? Most sightings fall into a few categories. Misidentified animals include otters, seals, swimming deer, large eels, and waterfowl. A partially submerged log can look remarkably like a humped back. Boat wakes create snake-like patterns that undulate across the water. Atmospheric conditions can produce mirages and optical illusions. As zoologist Dr. Roy Chapman Andrews noted in 1934, quote, "Even the simplest optical illusions become convincing if told and retold," unquote. Then there are the hoaxes. Beyond the surgeon's photograph, other famous fakes include a 2011 photo by George Edwards, who admitted in 2013 that he used a fiberglass model from a National Geographic documentary. And a sizable number of reported sightings have come from hotel and cafe owners, people with a direct financial interests in keeping the legend alive. Which brings us to the economics of Nessie. According to a 2018 study by accountant Gary Campbell, the Loch Ness Monster generates approximately £41 million, about $54 million, for the Scottish economy every year. That's more than the entire GDP of some small nations. Now, whether tourists believe in Nessie or think it's all nonsense, they still flock to the loch. They take boat tours, visit museums, and buy souvenirs. So, here's the bottom line. It's unfortunate and sad, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news because I honestly would love if this were real, but the Loch Ness Monster, as popularly imagined, does not exist. The scientific evidence is overwhelming. Loch Ness is too young, too small, and too thoroughly examined. No bones have been found, no reptilian DNA has ever been detected, and every major piece of photographic evidence has been debunked or explained away. But that doesn't mean that every sighting is a lie or hoax. People genuinely see things they can't immediately explain. Logs, waves, eels, seals, boats, and poor lighting. The human brain is wired to find patterns and meaning, especially when we're looking for something mysterious. Add in a century of cultural conditioning, a thriving tourism industry, and the sheer romance of the idea, and you've got a legend that refuses to die. Nessie serves a purpose beyond science. As psychologist Dr. June Singer observed, monster stories, quote, lift us out of the known and give us the courage and imagination to create something new, unquote. The legend provides wonder, mystery, and a reminder that not everything in the world has been cataloged and explained, even if in this case, it probably has been. So, is the Loch Ness Monster real? Well, no. But the legend? Yes. That's real. Worth millions and likely to outlive us all. Now go plan that trip to Scotland and keep your eyes on the water, just in case. Thank you so much for listening to Fool's FAQ. Feel free to leave a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts, as it also helps new listeners discover the show. For more fascinating answers to your burning questions, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and always stay curious.